pleasant day to all, and welcome to our pilot episode of Facts Talk podcast. This project is made possible through the collaboration between Facts Asia and the Konrad-Adenauer Stiftung Philippines. I am Dianne Querrer. I'm a TV host and news anchor based in the Philippines, and I am honored and excited to be your host for this series. So here in Facts Talk, we will examine Europe's strategy for cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. And today, we will focus on the first priority area for cooperation, that is sustainable and inclusive prosperity. In the past few years, European states' engagement has been increasing in the Indo-Pacific. Last year, Facts Asia and CAS Philippines launched a compilation of special articles that showcased how European states have significant interest in the region and their policy recommendations for cooperation between the Philippines, ASEAN, and European Union. And now, in our pilot episode, we will be informed and be updated on what are the recent developments in sustainable and inclusive prosperity concerning Indo-Pacific states and EU foreign policy. Joining us today is the senior researcher from the German Institute of Development and Sustainability, Dr. Ariel Hernandez. Good day, Dr. Hernandez.
Good day, good afternoon to you. I'm so happy to be here today, and it's actually my first podcast interview, so I'm a bit terrified, I must admit, but I'm sure you'll be able to help me. So my name is Ariel Hernandez, as you mentioned, and I am currently a senior researcher at the German Institute of Development and Sustainability, which is one of the leading think tanks in the world researching in development research and sustainability. So I do research, I do training and policy advice. I research on sustainable development, climate protection, environmental governance, knowledge cooperation, negotiations, and stakeholder dialogue. I teach in universities in Germany, Mexico, and Spain. And and also in this Managing Global Governance Academy at our institute. I also advise international organizations and national governments on sustainability-related issues.
Wow. With those credentials and the story that you shared about your life, we are very excited to tackle with you this subject matter about inclusive prosperity or sustainable and inclusive prosperity. All right, so let's start now, Dr. Ariel. How will you define sustainable and inclusive prosperity, and why is this worth knowing about, Dr. Ariel?
Yes, we already have three different concepts in this title. So you have sustainable and inclusive prosperity. So when we talk of sustainable, we think of a vision for the future. So we have targets. So where do we want to head to? So in this concept, the sustainability, it is aligned to the Agenda 2030 agenda for sustainable development, as well as with the Climate Paris Agreement. So these are the visions that we have for the future, like no poverty, equality. And then when we talk of inclusivity, then at the moment, I would then say, let's think of the ways that exclude people. So what are the concepts or the trends or the processes that exclude some parts of the society? So one would be these dominant structures. For example, we have injustice towards minorities or gender imbalance, and these dominant structures are actually excluding parts of the society, and that should not be the case. And then we have prosperity. So I'm so happy that we did not use economic growth, but we use the word prosperity. Prosperity is not only about having more money than the others or even having money at all, but it means that we as humans can become humans, or that we could flourish, and that the environment can flourish and the planet can flourish. So this is actually the definition of prosperity.
All right. Well, I must say, no one is left behind, no?
Yes,
when we say
definitely.
inclusive, and then you mentioned that prosperity is not just about having money, but being able to flourish. All right. Now, I have a bundle of questions for you, Sir Ariel. Why is the EU interested in sustainable and inclusive prosperity? What can the Indo-Pacific region learn from the EU's experience and approaches? And why is the EU interested to share its experiences through the EU strategy for cooperation?
Yes. First, I would like to say that the EU is interested in a sustainable and inclusive prosperity, not only for altruistic reasons. So you've heard of the term white man's burden. So they are trying to move away from this paradigm that the Europeans are reaching out to poor countries. So they want to move away from that. In this case, the concept that they have, that the EU has, is like a framework of partnership with developing countries. So it is not for altruistic reasons, but the EU also has its own economic interest, for example, to ensure the stability of global value chains. So we are finding ourselves in exciting but also in scary times where we see disruptions in the global value chain. So this is one of the main motivation of the EU to actually, so they say that for Europe to prosper, the others should prosper as well, for security reasons, economic reasons.
All right. What are the distinctive features for cooperation and or hard connectivity and soft connectivity potentials that may contribute to better cooperation between European states and the Indo-Pacific region, Sir Ariel?
Oh, well, yes. Thank you for this question. So, cooperation itself it seems a very vague concept. At the same time, in research, so for example, we say that for cooperation to flourish, there should be some requirements, like we should have this we identity. Also that we need trust between each other, as well as we need venues or channels for communication, as well as to build a specific reputation that, for example, if we promise something, that we would deliver. And also enforcement and fairness. Enforcement means that we can also be held accountable should there be misgivings, and that this shortcomings can be corrected. And this definition is defines the framework for cooperation between EU and the Indo-Pacific region. And at the same time, we should also be aware that there are different cooperation preferences between European states and the Indo-Pacific region, and also that we could learn from each other. And also, it's a work in progress. So it's of course, there will be some shortcomings from the EU side, also from the Indo-Pacific side, and then we are learning from each other. But this is only possible if we have a common goal, for example, sustainable and inclusive prosperity, and that we could trust each other, and then also that we have this stable line of communication, and then discuss on critical issues as well. For example, and we are aware, for example, of the past practices where cooperation was not really cooperation, but it has this donor and recipient dynamic. You have the EU being donors and the Indo-Pacific regions as recipients. And as I mentioned earlier, we want to move away from this paradigm and then move towards this paradigm of partnership and cooperation, where we have ownership on the process, both the EU countries and the Indo-Pacific countries as well.
How can Indo-Pacific and EU states benefit from such developments? And what are the challenges in the strategy for cooperation in sustainable and inclusive prosperity? And also, we want to know, what is the role of China and how can we expect it to respond to the EU strategy?
Yes, I mean that I would then answer this question by perhaps giving an example of a current development in the EU at the moment when it comes to cooperation. And one development is the social and environmental due diligence regulation in the EU at the moment. So this is an instrument where European companies can be held liable when they are subcontractors in the Indo-Pacific region commit violations, for example, in human rights or environmental when they cause environmental problems. So that and because of this liability, European companies would actually increase their standards. There are some criticisms that when European companies do business in Europe, they help to higher standards, but when they work or when they do business in developing countries, that they forget their standards. I mean, these environmental standards or adherence to human rights. So this is one development. At the same time, this development is also a work in progress, and there's several questions that need to be answered also from the perspective of the Indo-Pacific region. For example, would this environmental and social due diligence compete with other standards, practices in the Indo-Pacific region? For example, when it comes to voluntary sustainability standards. So you've heard of fair trade and all these eco labels, and in some cases, this new development could hamper the effects of these voluntary sustainability standards. And from the perspective of the Indo-Pacific region, there are also other questions whether this regulation, so you see we have this regulation, the EU, and they're also affecting partners in the Indo-Pacific region. And it's a question whether this regulation would reinforce existing oligopoly structures and existing privileges in the region, whether, for example, we know from in some countries where the political elite control the business sector. And would this regulation just promote these structures? And then also question whether this regulation would pose as de facto non-tariff trade barriers for developing countries or for the Indo-Pacific region. And that would, because it would mean higher costs for market access and also inhibition to the integration to the global value chain. Yes, and also the question whether this regulation would actually reduce inequalities or hamper the protection of the most vulnerable workers, for example, with child labor. So this is a very highly contentious issue where, as you know, from my experience, I was also a child laborer where my family was very much dependent on child labor. But with this regulation, this would be prohibited. And there's a question whether what would be the alternative for those child laborers. So in most cases, that would be prostitution or cyber pornography. And so it's a question whether are we creating new problems because of the solutions? And with regards to China, so that's another topic. I see that China is an important factor in the Indo-Pacific region. At the same time, from the development cooperation perspective, China is so important that we cannot ignore China. At the same time, there are also other countries like Japan, India, South Korea, Australia, or even Singapore, Malaysia, that they have already initiated South-South cooperation mechanisms. And China is a very important driver of South-South cooperation. And actually, I see this South-South cooperation as an important complementary mechanism that would also improve the relations between the EU and the Indo-Pacific region. And with this South-South cooperation, we are able to instill new principles in the global norms. For example, I'm so excited, or I'm so happy to see that there are some principles from the Indo-Pacific region that are being considered as interesting. For example, the Malaysian model of cooperation, development cooperation, where they emphasize Islamic principles such as zakat or sadaq to legitimize and operationalize cooperation. And what is interesting in this with these principles is that they would distribute the risk between the donors and the recipients among the partners, which is quite interesting, especially knowing that in the current practice of development assistance, that the risks are solely borne by the recipients or by the developing countries. So as you see, there are also some things that in the Pacific region that could contribute in modernizing or revising the global norms on development cooperation. And China is a very big player in enabling this instilling of new principles in the global order. Yes, it's a very contentious topic as well, and especially with in light of the current geopolitical tensions, that we are sometimes losing the vision for the future, and the future in this sustainable future, China is a big player as well.
All right. Regarding China, Sir Ariel, I would like to ask this question. Um, do this EU sustainable and inclusive prosperity projects offer or present itself as a better alternative than China's Belt and Road Initiative? And also, what does it mean for small states like the Philippines? Is it good for us, or are we pressured like to choose sides, Dr. Ariel?
It's a very interesting question, and I do not want to burn myself by taking one side. What I want to do is that it doesn't there's no limitation to be in both sides. I'm not saying neutrality, but omnipartiality. So in some cases, when it is beneficial for the Philippines to partner or to cooperate with the EU, we should do that. At the same time, if it's beneficial for us, for many reasons, to partner or cooperate with China, we should also do that. So we're not obliged to choose sides. Yes.
All right. Dr. Ariel, here's my question, another question for you. Does Germany have a leading, or does Germany has a leading role when it comes to sustainable and inclusive prosperity? And can you please name some important initiatives from Germany?
Yes, I mean, Germany is one of the first movers in, for example, in sustainable energy and also in climate protection. And Germany is one of the few countries where the Green Party is a major player in for example, in the parliament. And I would speak about this Energiewende. Perhaps you have heard of that before, where Germany wants to move from fossil fuels to renewable energy, and it is seen as very ambitious, and it is seen as a model for other developing countries. And in the past, for example, so Germany we had projects. I mean, German institutions with Philippine institutions like Ateneo de Manila in establishing a curriculum on sustainable energy, or expanding their masters in public administration, including an energy track, transition energy track. So there are some soft cooperation happening, but I would say that unfortunately the Philippines is not a priority country for Germany, especially after this reform of the strategy of Germany. We have this BMZ 2030 reform, which means that Germany reduce the numbers of partner countries. So at the moment, there are only 65 countries, and the Philippines is not one of them, unfortunately. But of course, it doesn't mean that there's no cooperation happening. At the same time, we have to question ourselves, why is it the case that the Philippines is not in the radar of Germany or of many European countries?
All right, Dr. Ariel, to cap our conversation today, looking ahead, what are the next steps that should be undertaken to further improve the cooperation between the EU and the Indo-Pacific region?
One thing that I would like to suggest is to intensify knowledge cooperation between the Indo-Pacific region and the EU. When knowledge cooperation, for example, means for example, the establishment of the Tsunami Research Center in Indonesia, which occurred in the last 5 years, and Germany spearheaded this knowledge cooperation. And when it comes to the Philippines, for example, I think that the Philippines can benefit on knowledge cooperation when it comes to climate resilience. Also, we have countries like the Netherlands that are also vulnerable to sea level rise, and Philippines could benefit from this knowledge cooperation. Other countries, maybe more advanced countries economically, like Japan, they have already existing cooperation, knowledge cooperation, for example, on how Japan should establish its cooperation program. One example would be the approach that Japan would not directly support one recipient country, but choose a third country that would cooperate with the other country. So it's not Japan doing cooperation directly, but choosing another country because this country has more experience. So there are different formats that can be formats of cooperation that could further advance knowledge cooperation as well.
Well, on that, I would like to thank you, Dr. Ariel Hernandez. You had an insightful pilot episode. Thank you again, sir, and thank you to all of you who joined us today. If you love and learn from this podcast, please share this episode to your friends and colleagues. And also would like to invite you, like and follow Facts Asia official social media accounts, facebook.com/FactsAsia on Facebook, and at FactsAsia.org on Twitter. You may also visit our website, www.factsasia.org, to stay updated on our projects. Dr. Ariel Hernandez, thank you very much again. And that's all for now. This is your host, Dianne Querrer. Until the next episode of Facts Talk.